In the next 10 years, it is projected that the number of people in the Tacoma area with dementia will go from around 12,000 to 20,000. Lutheran Community Services wants to help them. The problem is that nobody knows who they are. Hi, I'm Molly Petersen, and this is my capstone about writing a communication plan for LCS. In this presentation today, I'll go over the project development, theories used, and my ultimate suggested strategies for LCS. So to begin, let's talk about what LCS is and what they do for a little bit. Lutheran Community Services Northwest is a nonprofit working across Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. Their overall mission is to provide health, justice, and hope to the communities they serve. They have such a broad mission because they offer an extremely broad range of services, from refugee resettlement to mental health services, addiction treatment, and the list goes on and on and on. The South Puget Sound office where I worked mostly focuses on providing services to seniors, from home care to Meals on Wheels to dementia services, which is what I worked with, and so on and so forth. During my time interning at LCS, I learned a lot about nonprofits and working at them. I saw how burnout could be such a prevalent issue in the nonprofit field. Not enough people work, and there's not enough money to pay all the people that they need, so people are often overburdened with responsibilities. That means that things like marketing and PR often fall by the wayside, understandably, because providing the tangible services that they do and doing the hands-on work needed for that will of course come ahead of marketing and PR, but also that's an important part of reaching more people and providing more services to more people. So I was largely brought on to help with their new dementia-friendly Pierce County initiative. This initiative was the result of a $3 million grant that they got for launching new programs for people with dementia in the Pierce County area. These are programs that both help provide community for people with dementia, provide support for their caregivers, and also try to make businesses like banks, restaurants, and so on and so forth a more hospitable place for people with dementia to go to. So I was largely tasked with writing a communication plan to help launch this new initiative. As just at the beginning of this project, I realized that in order to properly do this, it would be really helpful to also write a plan to help them build better brand awareness for LCS. And this would help them reach new audiences, which was another goal of theirs going along with this. So yeah, that was the main objective of this, was to essentially write a really big communication plan with two different parts to it. One, looking at building broader brand awareness for LCS in the Tacoma area, and also one looking to help launch these new dementia services programs that didn't exist in Tacoma already. So let's get started with the SWOT analysis. So we all know SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We're just looking at the organization and seeing where they're doing really well and where they're doing poorly. So considering even when I first started at LCS and was looking to start there doing my preliminary research, I had a really hard time figuring out what they do. So their main strength, I would say, is that there is some awareness among Lutheran congregations in the area, but overall, knowing that we live in the none zone where fewer people go to church than do go to church means that that's a really pretty small audience. Their weaknesses, I think that there's a lot of weaknesses to their communication strategies, but the main one being that there was a merger in 2001 between Lutheran Family Services and Lutheran Social Services that ultimately, it wasn't well communicated that those two were going away and being replaced by Lutheran Community Services. And so ultimately, there are still lots of congregations. There's even documents within LCS that still have old branding from one of the old organizations. And so that's one of the main weaknesses that's contributing to the lack of brand awareness, is that they really didn't ever reestablish themselves after this merger. Furthermore, Another weakness and a challenge for me is the extremely broad range of services provided. I mean, they do so many things across such a broad range of places, and so it's understandable why they wouldn't have such a cohesive organization-wide strategy. So I largely focused on the Tacoma area and the senior services that we provide. And okay, moving on to opportunities. So I think that one of the big opportunities that's facing the South Puget Sound office is that they're relocating their Tacoma office. They're only moving a few blocks away, but I think that this is a really powerful new beginning for them to reach many more people. They're moving to an area that will need their services more, I would say, and they'll be a positive force in that community. And furthermore, this funding that initially brought me on has a specific allocation towards marketing that I think will be especially useful to them in distributing just different merchandise that will help establish them, as well as other sorts of advertising on Facebook and so on that I'll get into later. And then threats/competitors. I think in nonprofits, it's kind of hard to identify a threat because the profit model or lack thereof is very different. But I would say because there are so many for-profit senior living and home care businesses, they definitely can dominate the attention span and community discourse about this. So I think that can definitely be a threat to them. Okay, so let's talk about some theories. First, we already talked about SWOT analysis quite a bit, but it would definitely played a really key role in looking at this. Next, moving on to framing. So framing is essentially placing a information into a field of meaning. So I think that the biggest challenge, because again, LCS is trying to reach broader audiences and move away from the kind of Lutheran stigma that there is around that term. So they trying to move away from people getting afraid of the term Lutheran was one of the biggest things that I focused on in the wording and messaging of their branding. I put an emphasis on this little snippet that's from their homepage, which says Lutheran or LCS Northwest services are provided without regard to race, ethnicity, national origin, religious belief, gender identity or expression, sexual orientation, age, marital status, ability, military or veteran status, source of income, or political affiliation. So as you can see in their mission, they really are trying to reach as many people as possible and provide their services to as many people as they can, and putting an emphasis on the fact that these are free services, they're for anyone, and they're for anyone despite the fact that we're have our roots in religion. Furthermore, moving on to critical race theory. So I think that this is an issue with the nonprofit industry as a whole, so I'll just touch on it briefly because it's not something that I can tackle in my 6-month project. But one of the sort of aims of this communication plan that they wanted to focus on, but I objected to early on, was they were wanting to reach more diverse audiences. I think that having worked at and gone to a different Lutheran institution, oftentimes the term diverse just means people of color, and I think that was the aim that they were talking about in this. But the main issue with this is the fact that LCS is still a largely an organization that's still mostly run by white people, and so in order to properly serve these more diverse audiences, they need to also be serving them in their employment practices and through their board and so on and so forth. So I think that reaching these audiences without making those structural changes themselves first would not be effective. So I told them that, and hopefully they'll take that to heart if they really want to reach these people and effectively serve these people, because serving these communities doesn't just come through the services that the nonprofit provides, but also through things like employment, and lifting them up in other ways. Okay, now on to their strategies. Ultimately, these strategies had to be delayed because of coronavirus. So they aren't the key point of this presentation, because also formulating these strategies took a lot of the previous work that I've already mentioned. That being said, in my strategies, I put a really heavy emphasis on reaching their audience through Facebook. There's a few reasons for this. First of all, Facebook, unless you want to advertise, is a free platform, meaning that you have a broad audience you can reach and there's no barriers there. And then also, you don't have to pay extra until you start advertising. Furthermore, I think that the audience that they're trying to reach, because ultimately we thought that the people who would be seeking their services would be either individuals with dementia or people whose parents they're trying to help. So generally middle-aged and older, and Facebook is like the main social networking platform that they use. And we think that this is like a really powerful tool. Furthermore, in terms of its efficacy and like using it when working at a nonprofit, you have so little time. I think that Facebook is something where you can write out a lot of content all at once and then schedule them ahead of time, and it doesn't have to be as time consuming as it has been for them. So I put a lot of energy into writing posts for them about their services, just establishing who they are, and giving instructions for advertising should they choose to do that. Furthermore, I gave them instructions on how to set up events on Facebook, because they have like weekly events for, they have a program called Music Men's Minds, and that's a weekly event that people on Facebook know about, and they could say they're attending, and that will just increase that audience. So yeah, I put a heavy emphasis on both the strategies they use and then also write a lot of content about the programs and services they offer. Furthermore, I wrote a lot about their print materials, just different like swag that they could have, and like what items I would suggest they get, like pens, because everyone loves a good pen. And then also the one piece of print material that I think that they really need as an organization is a brochure for their South Puget Sound office specifically, that in one document outlines everything they do, because I remember the first time I walked into their office, they had all these brochures for each of their different services they offer, but I still couldn't quite figure out what exactly it was that they did. And then also information about events and networking. I think that networking is one thing that it would be pretty easy for them to improve upon, and would make a big difference, because there's so many resources like Pierce County Aging and Elderly Resource Center, that like they're not listed on that. And there's so many other like different organizations like the Alzheimer's organization that they could work better with, that I think will serve as a mechanism for connecting people to their services. And then also events. I came up with some event plans, like an open house for when they move buildings, as well as one thing that I really wanted to focus on was working again with these mechanisms that can connect people to them. So like buying coffee for a local doctor's office that works, or like a geriatrics department of a hospital, because those will be people who can directly connect people with these services. So next steps. As I mentioned earlier, the implementation of these strategies and even the launching of these programs in the first place has been delayed, and so ultimately I don't know how effective this will be until they can do it. But I think that the kind of blessing in disguise of this is that as they have had to cut back on their programming during this time, there are more people in the organization who have time to look at this communication plan and do some of the hands-on specific planning that will need to go into building broader organizational awareness. And already I've seen some positive feedback from people who work in the organization on the communication plan. And I'm happy to see that as they can use these services and build from them. So this project taught me a lot about working at a nonprofit and just how little time there actually might be for something like planning for communication. And it also taught me a lot about writing a communication plan. I was doing this project concurrently with a different project I was doing for Dr. Young's 461 class, where we were writing a communication plan, but as a team. And I learned a lot about the differences between working alone and working as a team, and how helpful feedback as a group is, and bouncing ideas off of each other and different input is. And then also just learning a lot about like communicating with someone who might be writing a communication plan for me, or so on and so forth, about how having a specific vision or specific goals is really helpful. because overall, like, the goal that they set for me was to just build broader brand awareness. Well, that communication plan could ultimately go on forever, and I just had to choose a stopping point for them. Whereas if they could choose like a specific area in which they want to grow, which they also did through their dementia friendly initiative, sort of, that would have been very helpful. But ultimately, I hope that this goal, or this communication plan, helps them reach their goal of better serving the Tacoma area through health, justice, and hope.